Which part of your brain is associated with religion? Well, a new study shows that if you shock one particular part of your brain, you're less likely to believe in religion. This is according to one study that was recently published in the journal Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience. Researchers at the University of York did this study, and according to it, they used something known as a transcranial magnetic stimulation to disrupt the posterior medial frontal cortex, the part of the brain that deals with problem solving. In the study, half of the participants received low-level stimulation that had no effect on the brain, and the other half were zapped with enough energy to decrease the brain activity of that part of the brain. Now, they were told to think about death and asked about their feelings on religion and also immigrants. They're like, let's also ask them about immigrants.
Throw that in there.
Now, the reason why they went to that part of the brain is because that portion of the brain is known for problem solving. And they realized that, hey, ideology might also have something to do with it. So let's see if we can do something about, shocking the brain and then convincing them to no longer believe in religion. And here's what happened. We found that when we experimentally turned down the posterior medial frontal cortex, people were less inclined to reach for comforting religious ideas despite having been reminded of death. Specifically, participants whose brain activity had decreased to 32.8% less believed in God, angels, or heaven, and in the devil, demons, and hell than those who received the sham treatment. It's kind of incredible. So I don't really know what to make of this. Now, conservatives are kind of taking this and they're like, you see that? That means that those who don't believe in religion have brain damage. But since that part of the brain is associated with problem solving, you immediately want to go to something that solves a problem, right? So you're confronted with death. You're afraid of death. You want to solve that fear. And the way people solve that is through belief in religion. Right? So I think that's the thing that happens. But for people like me who are atheists, I mean, yes, it's very tempting to believe in a higher being when you're going through like a health crisis or something like that. But that's not necessarily my way of solving my problem or solving my issue of fear. I don't know. It's interesting.
Right. That's the same issue that I had. I was like, what's the key takeaway from this?
Yeah.
And I have a bachelor's in psychology, actually. So I was like, let me put on my psych hat and see. But I couldn't really get anything from it. It was like my psych hat revealed nothing.
Yeah.
What I did come up with, though, was that the frontal cortex is responsible for problem solving and logic. So it's a more sophisticated way of thinking of things.
Yeah.
So without that, once you decrease activity, you're not going to have a sophisticated answer to a problem, like, i.e. religion. So I think that's what it is, that, religion is something that I'm not religious, so I had the same thing too. I'm like, whoa, the more logically you think about things, doesn't it mean that you wouldn't think religion makes sense?
Yeah.
But I can't have my own biases sort of inform that. So what I thought was just that you're just not... You use a different part of your mind to think about sophisticated things like that. So that's what it is, I think. It has nothing to do with, if you're smart, you believe in God. I think it's just, if you're not thinking about things, you don't have that as a device to sort of help you figure it out.
Yeah, that's
true.
interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
My question, so if you wanted to pay to no longer be a Catholic per se, could you just go get a shock treatment from, are they selling this service, or is it just in its research stage right now? What's the deal with this? I mean, you could market this. I mean, this could have a mass appeal to anybody who's been raised in a former belief system that they don't want anymore. That seems like a really quick fix.
Yeah, well, I don't highly doubt that that's what they're trying to sell, but if that is a fascinating suggestion.
Buy a shock treatment, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, we have a really dark history with shock treatment.
Okay, never.
So I wouldn't advocate for that. But let's go to the whole immigration thing, because not only did they ask about religion, they also asked the respondents to share their thoughts about immigration. And here's what they found. People who received magnetic stimulation were 28.5% more positive in their feelings toward immigrants, with sentiments against their country than those who didn't. Okay, so if you were shocked in that part of the brain, you're more kind toward immigrants, which was another, I think, shocking part of that study. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
Isn't it so random? Like, also, how do you feel about immigration? What are your immigration beliefs? It's just so random.
Yeah.
So they were more sympathetic to people
They're more sympathetic to immigrants if that part of that brain was shocked.
So, okay.
So again, it does go to the conservative argument that if you're in favor of immigration or sympathetic toward immigrants, you have brain damage, right? Which I hate the way that it's being spun like that.
Is that the spin? Because
people spin everything.
Everything, right? Because what I got from that is if you take away people's problem solving and logic, because I think that those are sometimes informed by preconceived notions. Like sometimes you think if you're listening to an immigrant tell their story, and what I read in the article was immigrants talking about criticizing the United States.
Yeah.
So if the part of your brain is working, then you're like, how dare you talk about the United States? What about your country? Maybe you're piecing that together. But when the activity is decreased and you're just a regular person not thinking, and someone is like, the country is bad because, I can't do this, I can't provide health care, then you're like, you do have a point. And you don't have to think about all those other things.
So, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I didn't study psychology, so maybe you can answer this question for me. But is that part of the brain also associated with preconceived notions? Because if it is, then that totally makes sense, and that makes me feel a lot better about this study.
Well, I don't think that it's about preconceived notions so much as it is about problem solving and logic and how we come to solutions. So I think in the regular brain, if you're confronted with a problem, you try to figure out, what do you know about this? What do I know about immigrants? What do I know about the way that the United States treats people?
Yeah.
And then you think about how you feel about that, and then you come to a conclusion. So I think you call on that type of stuff, like what information did you previously know about it to inform how you feel about it now.
Yeah.
So that's what I got from it. I didn't get the conservative spin. I got that, when people are left to their own devices, as we are, like if you took a child, then they would be sympathetic and they would not need religion because they don't feel the need to have to answer all these questions.
I think, the big question is, why do you believe certain things? Why do you believe in Allah versus Jesus? Or why do you believe in alternative medicine versus conventional medicine? And a lot of it has to do with what you're exposed to, as well as a number of biases that we as humans have that sort of colors the information we receive from the world. A large portion of it's geography, right? So if you're born in Oklahoma, you're much more likely to become a Christian than you are a Hindu, simply because everyone else around you is a Christian. But in terms of the specifics of our beliefs, they're very, very highly driven by, what we're imprinted with early. So, those people that are around us, as well as the fact that we naturally, as humans, seem to have these pieces built into our brain that want us to believe things that are not necessarily backed up by the evidence. There's been some very, very interesting research over about the last 15 years or so that has cleverly shown that children, I'm talking here under 2 years old, seem to be naturally wired to believe in things that are not necessarily actually there. And that certainly helps contribute to our belief in supernatural things later in life. I think one of the things that you have to do if you're trying to help other people see that maybe what it is that they are thinking is not necessarily accurate is you don't go up to them and say, hey, you're wrong. That's a completely wrong thing to do, and we actually know that from research, is it's called psychological reactance. And I'll just say, hey, screw you, I'm double right now. So instead what you have to do is you have to help them understand, why is it that I believe these things and why is it that you believe what you believe? I'm a huge fan of the scientific method. I think one of the best things that our culture has produced over the last 400 years is the scientific method. And the reason is because what the scientific method does is it takes all of these biases, all these heuristics that we're naturally prone to, and it helps to eliminate them. It helps to control for all the things that we as humans naturally do so that we don't fool ourselves. And that's the key to any sort of real understanding of things, is not just, oh, well, here's my evidence for it. It's, well, here's my unbiased evidence for it. For me personally, it's about seeing the world as it is, not as I want it to be. And I think the world would be a much better place if all of us were trained in how to think critically, in how to think rationally, in how to logically examine questions, and not just find what I want to believe, which is what we do naturally, but find what actually is, or what actually isn't, so that you do so in an unbiased way.
Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief. Mark Twain, it's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. Why? Because they don't, understandably, want to realize they've been fooled. But it's a wonderful thing to realize you've been fooled. It's a great gift, because from that point you will not be fooled any longer. It's a wonderful gift.
Abundance is yours. Claim it today. Subscribe for more great videos.